Welcome to the Tiny RV Podcast, where we discuss how to travel in a tiny space without spending a lot of money or compromising on life. I'm your host, Darren, and in this week's podcast, Amy in a van. Welcome to the second episode of the Tiny RV Podcast. This time we'll speak with Amy, who travels in a Ford Transit van. Amy has supported my Odyssey camper project since I got started, and I finally had a chance to catch up to her at the Grand Canyon after the 2019 Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. After the interview with Amy, we'll talk about the concept of stealth camping, and I'll share some of my favorite spots. Please note that this interview was conducted outside, so there's a little background noise, as you'd expect. With that said, on to the interview. So today I'm here with Amy. Amy's a solo female traveler that met online, and I spoke to her over at the RTR this year. She is traveling in a transit mid-roof, and she's customized the inside for travel. And I'll come back to that later and we'll talk about it. But first of all, Amy, how about a little background about yourself? Roughly where you're from and how you got to this point.
I'm from Texas. I grew up camping with my family. My father loved camping, and it's been a love of mine for years. I retired last year, about a year ago, and that was my plan. Originally to start camping in an Odyssey. Hit a point where in Texas it was too hot in the summer to do that overnight. So I bought the Transit, and while my husband is still working and while I'm retired, I plan on driving around and seeing as much of the country as I can.
Excellent. So your first trip was in the Transit was what, RTR, the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous?
I made a very short trip before that to Caprock Canyons in Texas. It was only a couple nights and enjoyed that immensely. But yes, the RTR has been the longest trip I've made so far.
And that was the shakedown run for your Transit van?
Yep.
Okay. And what have you done? I got a chance to see your Transit van and see what you did with the floor. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Nice job. And if you made any mistakes, they don't show to me. So tell us a little bit about what you have in your van and what you've done to customize it.
Okay. I bought it as just an empty cargo van. So my husband helped. Most of the energy has been mine, but it's still both of us. Insulated it with on the floor, the polystyrene, here and there, some Reflectix. The walls are the mineral wool batting, and the flooring itself on plywood, it's Lumber Liquidators LPV, luxury vinyl plank.
Okay. The
walls are just a thin paneling from probably Lowe's. I plan on putting in a bed, but right now it's a cot that's strapped in with mattress on top of it. And really, other than that, while I have some grand plans, I haven't implemented some of the things I thought I was going to do. I don't know if I will. I do have two small cabinets that I bought at Lowe's, and above them is a countertop, again from Lowe's, that I poured resin on, and my backsplash is some artwork of mine that I poured resin on, and it's stuck to the wall with Velcro. Yeah. Velcro's my favorite.
Well, it looks great. And what I thought was really cool is you have a little wine cooler built into your shelves. It might not be the first practical thing, but I'm like, well, that's cool. That's pretty neat. Did you make any mistakes along the way?
Oh, heck yeah. We put the flooring in over, the spare tire goes underneath, and there's a hand crank in the back of the van, and the flooring goes over that. So we're going to have to cut a little section off of that off. I can't even, I think every step of the way there's something that you don't do the way you probably should have, and you learn by experience, but for the most part, I'm not terribly unhappy.
That's what I liked about your setup. You didn't let the perfect be the enemy of progress, and you got out there and you're making it work and then make adjustments along the way. I always say when it's nice to do a complete van build or something and get everything right the first time through, but you find little things that, I didn't really need this and I wish I had done this, and so it's nice to go out on a couple of trips when it's kind of half done.
It is.
To see what you'd like to do.
Yeah, I had it in my head that I might put in a sink and a water pump. I really don't think I want to. I don't want to take that counter space away, and it's not very hard to just pour water out of a jug. So I think most of the time, simple is better.
And you can stand up in that transit,
I can
right?
stand up in it, yes.
That's cool.
My husband's 6 feet. He has to stoop a little. He could stand up when it was an empty cargo van, but now not quite.
Okay. Yeah, you finished out the roof in there also,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Well, I can understand. So when's your husband going to join you?
Well, we don't know yet. He is still working, maybe another year, 2, 3.
Okay.
I did marry a slightly younger man, so
Well, good for you.
he's forgiven.
That's always a goal when you can do it.
Yeah.
My wife is about 5 years younger than me, so I haven't been able to convince her to do any extended Odyssey trips. But then again, I think 2 people in a Honda Odyssey would be pretty tight.
I agree.
And especially at 50, I'm not ready to do that kind of thing. If you were a 22-year-old kid, I'd say go for it. You and your girlfriend, when you both weigh 100.
Yeah, 22, I was a lot smaller.
Yeah, same here. When you weigh 150 pounds, it's no big deal for a guy. All right, so now you're traveling right now, as we mentioned, alone. Do you have any special advice for women, solo travelers? I mean, a lot of women are concerned about safety, and I think you're safer out in BLM land or in the desert than you are in a city, but what are your thoughts on it?
I also feel that for the most part I'm about as safe when I travel as I am at home. I probably will not overnight in a rest stop. I just have a fear that fear's concerned that might not be the safest place. But otherwise, I've got air horn, bear spray.
Now bear spray is actually... I've heard that from a number of people. And
what I've read, I think it's probably not going to be real wise to deploy, plus I'm not like armed and ready at every moment of the day, but I think you don't have the distance that it's effective is so close, you're already in trouble by the time you're using it.
Maybe, but I wouldn't want to get sprayed by bear spray.
No. And I have the motion detector solar lights that I can magnet to the outside of the car. If I am somewhere where I'm by myself, I don't want to use them if I might illuminate somebody else's camping. But really, I'm not very concerned. If I'm inside and it's fairly remote, I'll lock the doors.
You're fairly well traveled, and you mentioned that you retired out of the Army, so...
well, I was in the Army, but I retired out of corporate.
Your corporate job?
Yeah.
And you've traveled around quite a bit, so I think the more you travel, the less fearful you are. You start to realize that all the things you thought were going to go wrong really don't.
Right.
And, I mean, it's not to say to be careless traveling alone, but reasonable amount of security. And then
yes, I think some common sense, not putting yourself in situations that might have higher track of either curious or undesirable people, but for the most part, I just trust other people.
Okay, I think most people are trustworthy. So what are your short-term travel plans for let's say the next 6 months? Are there any places that you're planning on going?
The only trip that I have scheduled at the moment in the next 6 months is to the Grand Tetons for a photography workshop. My husband's going to come along with me on that, so we'll see whether we're speaking to each other at the end of it'll be almost 2 weeks. One of my kids has talked about traveling with me, but we don't have a destination in mind yet.
Okay.
But that'll be great.
Cool. That'd be cool to let them pick. And
yeah, and we actually may meet one another, but
now you've traveled in the past in other types of RVs, right?
We also have another diesel pusher. It's about 36, 37 feet. Very, very comfortable. This will make my husband happier when it's time for him to retire and we travel together, but we can both just stretch out, not be in each other's way. It is 20 years old, so it's kind of rattly, and we may end up replacing it when he does retire so that we're more comfortable on long trips, but it's good enough for now.
Well, what would you say the main difference is traveling in a large RV versus something like the Transit? Does it take longer to set up, or?
It actually doesn't take much time at all to set up. Comfort, first and foremost, gas mileage.
Or lack thereof.
Yes. I would guess I'm going to spend more time searching for places to make sure that will fit where the Transit, I just need to find out, is it acceptable to park there or not? But we haven't tried remote camping in the bigger one, so I don't know what that will be like.
That'll be interesting, and you'll have some experience when that time comes. Now you know how sign-ins at BLMs work and things like that, and it's.
And we don't tow yet, so that's another thing. You're either at a facility, and we're going to stay right there at our RV, or we will have to rent something, and that's what we've done in the past,
sure.
just rent something. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was a quandary when I was looking at a larger RV, is towing and whatnot, and one of the reasons I went with the Odyssey in the end is I had my vehicle and my sleeping bit, but again, size and comfort, everything's a compromise. Have you had any strange or weird or fun experience thus far? I know you haven't been out here this long, but...
Not really. It's been a wonderful time. It was charming when I pulled up in the parking lot here at Grand Canyon, and another young man pulled up beside me and seemed to want to talk, and it turned out he was looking for someone to dry camp beside, safety in numbers. Well, that wasn't my plan that night.
Yep.
But no, not yet.
I'd always follow that rule of don't let people pick you, pick them if you travel alone. I met some, I mean, it runs the gamut. It's the people on the road are reflective of society, and I've run into some people that I'd say are crazy homeless people, but then just...
I've worked with crazy people.
Yeah, I mean, you run into them everywhere, so it's just, when you run into more normal people, although I don't know that I'm qualified to say that they're normal, considering what I'm doing, but... So do you have any plans to do a blog or anything like that about your travels, or do any travel writing?
No, I'm too lazy.
Yeah,
I'm totally lazy.
Fair enough. Well, you're pursuing your painting and photography.
Yes, if I do anything while I travel that's sort of work-like, it'll be painting. But even then, while I painted pretty industriously while I worked full-time, since I've retired, I haven't done that much painting. So I guess I'm just enjoying time in life.
It's nice not to have to make plans and make decisions and just take it as it comes. Getting back to the RTR, the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, this is for people listening to this in the future. This was the 2019 Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. Haven't got the numbers yet, but I'd estimate there were probably 5,000 people there. Maybe not 5,000 vehicles, but people-wise, I think the crowd was similar to last year, but it's hard to judge because it was more spread out this year.
Yes.
What was your impression of the whole event, from the time you pulled in and then found a parking spot?
When I pulled in, it seemed fairly densely populated, more than I expected. I ended up, because of that, and thinking there would be more people coming and where I was guided to, kind of way out by myself. Not entirely. There were two other guys near me and then another one not too far away. So we may have had a slightly different experience than other people who were in the main group, if they're really the main group even is spread out. I enjoyed that. I think I was with a bunch of other loners, and I think I am to a certain extent, but I think I would like to try it again where I'm part of that daily community, a bigger community.
Sure. Yeah, last year when I did it, I went way out. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I didn't want to be near a bunch of partiers. Turns out it's not really that kind of crowd.
No, not at all.
For the most part, it's a pretty sedate crowd. And so this year I tried it differently, and I went right into the center of things, surrounded by RVs. And I'd say the only difference I really noticed was people like to run their generators if they have an RV. That puts me to sleep, actually. It's a nice steady drone, so it doesn't bother me. What does bother me is all the exhaust from them.
Yes.
So that was about the only negative that I took away from it this year.
I worried a little bit about the noise levels if I were in a bigger group, but I didn't. Granted, we were a ways out, but I didn't hear anything, and I think I'd be fine if I do that.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you for the interview, and we'll see how this podcast comes along. No promises. And for everyone that's hearing the background noise, we're actually doing this live at the Grand Canyon. It's kind of hard to find a quiet place where there aren't people. So you hear talking in the background, you hear water running, you probably heard a train horn. But that's the reality of a live podcast. So thanks again, Amy.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Amy for coming on the show and giving her perspective as a solo female traveler. Amy also did a little stealth camping at the Grand Canyon, overnighting in the main parking lot, which ties in with the next topic, stealth camping for beginners. Before we get started, let me define a couple terms in case you're new to this concept. In RV parlance, boondocking is camping someplace where you don't have water and electricity hookups. You have to rely on whatever you have on board to power your RV and sustain its occupants. If you drive out on BLM land in a dispersed camping area, you'll be boondocking. However, you're still in a camping area that allows you to be there. Stealth camping is a kind of boondocking, in that you aren't going to be plugged in or hooked up to anything. However, stealth camping takes place where people don't normally camp, and you'd rather not be discovered. It's not always illegal, although it can be, but you're staying overnight in an area that the authorities don't recognize as a camping spot. It's also not what you would normally think of as camping because you're not putting out a chair and cooking over a fire. As I said, stealth camping doesn't have to be illegal, but it's almost always done in a gray area. Here's an example. You might spend the night on a city street where overnight parking is allowed. It doesn't say you can't sleep in your tiny RV overnight, but that's probably because nobody thought to post it. In such cases, I say it's always better to ask forgiveness than permission. Just know that there's always a possibility you'll meet the local law enforcement during the evening. Note that if it is posted that overnight parking is not allowed, you could face a fine, but in most cases the cops will just tell you to move along unless you're parked in an area known for criminal activity. Although you can stealth camp in a tow-behind RV, it's a lot easier to get away with in a van or an SUV. That's because even a tiny trailer like a little guy or casita looks like a camper. One exception would be a converted utility trailer which can be made to look like a work vehicle. However, people do park tiny RVs and even full-size RVs on city streets. You just have to be aware that someone's going to think it more likely that there's somebody inside a vehicle that looks like it sleeps people. Slim Potato Head on YouTube has a video where he sleeps in his pop-up trailer, but leaves the top down, crawling in through the side door. I'd consider that a little extreme, but then, I certainly wouldn't expect that somebody was inside. I've stealth camped a bit, so I'll give you some suggestions and tell you about a few of the unlikely places that I've slept in just a moment. First, some tips for not getting caught. Number 1, avoid places where no overnight parking is posted. Also avoid areas clearly posted as private property or with no trespassing signs. You might have plausible deniability parking in a strip mall parking lot, but get caught at a plumbing shop with a fence around it and you'll have something extra to explain. Number 2, cover your windows on the inside with something that blocks light leakage. This often involves fitting an opaque panel. I like to use Reflectix, which is a silver mylar bubble wrap, with the outward facing side covered in black felt. The casual passerby will not be able to see in, and at night will not know they're looking at a piece of felt. Number 3, don't move around a lot after you settle in. You might think you're being quiet, but moving around in a vehicle is going to make things squeak, and anyone walking nearby will know something is up. It's also best to be in early and gone early so you're asleep at the quietest part of the night. Number 4, when possible, don't be the only vehicle in sight. You're hiding in plain sight, so use the camouflage provided by other vehicles. Another vehicle normalizes your presence as long as there are not people visible in the other vehicles. Last, don't stay in the same place more than one night in a row. You're more likely to be noticed and/or labeled as homeless, plus you ruin the spot for others. I've posted some more tips at odysseycamper.com. Just look for the post titled Sleeping Around. So here are some of the places I like to frequent when stealth camping. Hotels. I've traveled for business for years, and although every hotel asks for your license plate, I've yet to see anyone walking around checking them. An exception might be near an airport or other place where people might try to save a few bucks by parking in the hotel lot. Apartment complexes. This works well on weekends when people come to visit the apartment dwellers. Make sure you're in a spot without a number or one that's marked for guests. Just be aware that you're technically trespassing if you aren't the guest of a renter. A better technique is to park on surrounding streets where the overflow parking usually ends up. Nobody will notice you because the vehicles there are always changing. Strip malls. There are often 1 or 2 cars parked overnight at a strip mall, and the lighting can make you feel safer at night. The possibilities are endless, but let me tell you some specific places that I've stealth camped. Estes Park, Colorado. Right outside Rocky Mountain National Park is a touristy town called Estes Park. They should call it Estes No Park because it's full of no overnight parking signs. But I parked in one of the municipal lots without incident. I just tucked in close to a couple of empty cars that probably belonged to visitors in a nearby condo. In this case, it probably helped that I was in a minivan. Minivans rarely blend into suburbia. Disney World. Although the higher-end resorts all ask for ID and check plates, the bargain resorts, like all sports, often don't have a gate check, especially in the off-season. Just know that you're definitely trespassing if you get caught, which is why I don't get caught. Key West, Florida. Key West is one place you don't want to try to overnight park on a street. They don't allow it and it's strictly enforced. I found a parking lot with a $15 a day parking next to a house. I asked the owner if I could park overnight, and he said, "Yeah, but park near the back or the cops might kick you out." In this case, I paid for parking, but still had to remain stealthy because I forgot to mention that I would also be in the van. If you think $15 is a lot to pay just to spend the night, consider that an RV park in Key West can be 10 times that, and a hotel twice the amount of the RV park. Like camping in any unusual spot, stealth camping takes a little getting used to. However, when you combine it with another strategy like overnight parking at Walmart, you can really cut down on your travel expenses. When I reach my destination, I'll find a nice spot in a national forest or even a designated campground. I tend to use stealth camping more for the trip there than some kind of final destination. But either way, stealth camping is a tool you might want in your tiny RV toolbox. For episode 2 of the Tiny RV podcast, I've added a short segment at the end called Gear Review, where I'll talk briefly about a piece of equipment I'm using which has helped with my RV experience. I'll only talk about gear that I personally use. I'll also put a link in the show notes to Amazon, and if you'd like to support the show, you can use this to click through and we'll get a couple pennies on the sale. However, it does not raise the price that you pay for the item. Okay, so this time I want to tell you about an awesome camp light I found that I've been using since December of 2018. It's called the Rhino Tough Tent Light, and it's the best $20 I ever spent. This light has a hook on the top and it's designed to hang inside or outside a tent, but I use it in my minivan RV. It's waterproof, USB rechargeable, and can be turned on with the included remote or the built-in glow-in-the-dark button. It has 3 white light brightness settings. The brightest will easily light a 20-foot circle, and 2 brightness levels of yellow light, which does not attract insects. I mostly use mine in the van, but because it's waterproof, you could also hang it outside of your tiny RV. When it's time to turn in, just point the remote at the window and turn it off from inside like a wireless porch light. You can even turn it on the same way if you want to see what kind of bear is eating the food you left out. It's an amazing piece of tech for $20. I'll put a link in the show notes, but if your podcast player does not support show notes, just go to odysseycamper.com and look for the Tiny RV podcast in the menu. Once again, thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, or you didn't, please let me know by dropping a line to thetinyrvpodcast@gmail.com. Depending on your feedback, I'll decide where the podcast should go in the future. Safe travels, everyone.